Hello and welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I have a fantastic guest this week coming all the way from England. Now, I got to tell you, the quote from the Daily Echo is fantastic. I love this. An energetic and vibrant source of new rock and roll. And I've checked out some of their songs, and I have to say, that is an excellent description of these guys. You know, it's always great to find new music that excites you. I hear a lot of stuff, and I find a lot of it just sounds like stuff that's been recycled, but these guys really do sound fresh and unique, and I love their sound. Cannot wait till their new album comes out later this summer. From Our Propaganda, Jack Denton. Jack, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to be here, Scott. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking some time to talk to me. We have a mutual friend, great friend of the show, Steve Welton. I can't even speak this morning. It's early for me. Connected us, and I'm really glad because I've listened to some of your tracks. I really like the sound that you guys have. It fits in with the mainstream, but at the same time, it's kind of unique. Did you specifically work on creating a unique sound, or is this just the natural development of you guys playing together?
You know, it's actually a really interesting question, to be honest with you. I think anyone who goes into playing any kind of music, it doesn't matter whether it's rock and roll, it doesn't matter whether it's rap or country, anything like that. I think what you have is that you have those influences in you. And when you get 4 or 5 people in a room together, and they've all got different influences, all from different points in their lives, you know, that have meant something to them, it kind of bleeds through in the music as it goes. I mean, when me and the guys, despite being Our Propaganda, we've actually been playing for quite some time together, like as people, just in and out of bands and things like that. And the truth is, what you find is that everyone kind of brings their influences into it, and they develop over time. So years ago, when we first met each other, we were all like, I was probably into a lot more of like the classic rock side of stuff, Zeppelin, Aerosmith and stuff like that. And then my bass player was really into Nawabum, which is the new wave of British heavy metal from the 80s, which is a totally different like kind of background to me.
Sure.
Other than that, like Harvey, our guitar player, you know, he was really into like Van Halen and stuff like that. So you had this big difference in kind of, a lot of it was rock, obviously. Like that's kind of our background. But hang on, I just need to let my dog out.
Okay.
Right, off we go, mate. My goodness. But yeah, so what you end up having is you just end up having this real difference of influences. And when you get into a room together, I find that they just kind of bleed through naturally. I don't think there was anything necessarily preconceived about the sound. I think we knew what we wanted to do. And then when we kind of got into a studio for the first time to lay down a proper record, we routined it so heavily and made sure that it was right, that you kind of start getting a feel for how it should sound. And then when you're working with the right producer as well, who essentially becomes another member of the band, you know, that influence comes in and it starts to curate and create this sound that just becomes a fully fleshed out kind of thing.
That's an excellent point. And you're right. You know, you think about, 5 members of a band and everybody's got their own influences. The collection of that is going to create something unique. And as time goes on and we have more different styles of music and different styles of influences, I think it can get more and more interesting to see how those combinations will work and what they bring out. But you guys really, you could tell those roots are in there, but the overall sound is really something that's kind of fresh. And I think it's going to cut through a lot of the, red tape and stuff that's out there, because that's the real trick these days, isn't it? It's not just about being good or writing good songs. It's cutting through everything else.
I do agree. Yeah, to a point, definitely. I mean, my manager will always tell me that it is 100% about the songs. That's kind of his tagline when he walks into the space. He's like, "So where are the songs, boys?" You know what I mean? That's the very much his methodology with it all. And that's great, And as we were talking about Steve, he's been in the business a long time, so I look up to his advice, as it were. I respect it, and I take it on board, and I think that it's been pertinent in our growth as a band. I really do. But yeah, I think like it's interesting because like my main influences these days, they're quite varied now. So it's like I love classic rock. It is really my thing. But these days I find myself listening to. I love REM, for instance, one of my favorite bands. I love Fleetwood Mac, you know, which is probably more of the classic rock thing, but there's a lot of country and blues in their music as well, you know. Um, and but I also like modern acts. Like I even like 21 Pilots. I think they stumbled onto doing something really interesting with their music. And as you say, it cuts through the tape as a unique thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I do think that is important, yes. Because the thing is, with rock and roll, you can't reinvent the wheel, but you can add spokes to it. You can do something with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And you're right. Steve's right too. I mean, you have to have good material to be able to cut through. But I mean, just even having great material doesn't get you through all that. So no. There's like that. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch. You have to have both aspects of it. You know, it's interesting too. You talked about Fleetwood Mac. I remember they toured with Deep Purple in the 70s as an opening act, and I remember Roger Glover saying that, you know, if they were just a blues band at the time, and if you would have said to me, "Hey, Fleetwood Mac is going to go on to be this great success that they are today," I would have said you were joking.
Yeah, and I totally get that as well, because, you know, they have such humble beginnings, but obviously they have a great, you know, a great beginning with Peter Green, who was just like a blues, like he's a blue-eyed soul kind of blues man. You know what I mean? It's brilliant. He was a real innovator for British blues in that time. You know, and yes, I actually get what Roger Glover was saying at the time. You know, because by 1974, like the Mac are kind of looking around at each other going, oh, well, we're a bunch of British guys in California. We don't really know what to do anymore, you know? And they're like, oh, so where do we go from here? And then obviously Buckingham and Nicks, that edition was really exactly what they needed. You know, they'd been dropped from their label. And I believe they met at a recording session of some sort. And I knew that Mick Fleetwood was a fan of Buckingham's songwriting. So he invited him to join the band, which I think, you know, it's just one of those things that happens. Like it's such a coincidence that it would happen, but they become almost like a staple, you know, rock Americana group, and it's brilliant. You know, I think they're one of those great bands that kind of crosses that boundary between British and American music so well.
Yeah, and you know, they're so unique as songwriters, but yet they have the radio playability, but they have the ability to write stuff that would never make it to the radio because it just doesn't fit that commercial sound, but it's brilliant music.
Oh, it's fabulous. Like I must admit, I am more of a fan of the Buckingham Nicks era Fleetwood Mac for sure. It's the songwriting. The songwriting is so it's awesome. It's awesome, and they really played on that kind of a, you know, mystical thing that was very popular with you know, the new age kind of thought process in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other the band that I do the podcast on, Uriah Heep, connected to that very well with albums like The Magician's Birthday and Demons and Wizards. You know, it was a great time to just explore everything.
100%. Yeah, I mean, we'll get onto it, but I don't know if Steve mentioned it to you before, but we actually worked with Ken Hensley.
Oh, no kidding. No, he didn't tell me that.
Oh, yeah. We throughout 2016 and 17, when Ken's original, not what I say original, but his band, his solo act Livefire, were kind of out of commission. They were going on to do something for themselves. I think they were in a band called Wonderworld, which is obviously named after one of the Heat records. But yeah, like they're a great band, and they were really good at playing the Heap stuff, truly. But yeah, where Steve was once Ken's manager, you know, he basically, it was kind of a match that worked at the time, and we got to go out and get experience, you know, by playing to crowds on the road a little bit, you know, and we did some really fantastic things. But yeah, I was once the front man for Ken for singing Heat. Yeah, so.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah, I got to interview Ken 1 week before he passed away, and he was so gracious. He had just come home from an editing project, a video he was working on, and he was sitting in his car for the whole interview. And I said, "Well, Ken, you know, if you want, like, I'll call you back in another 10 minutes. You can go in and get relaxed or whatever." He goes, "I have so many dogs. If I just walk in the house, we'll never get this recording done." So he sat in his car and watched the sunrise in Spain while we talked. It was amazing. You know?
Yeah, we once spent some time out in Spain with him because we were recording he was doing a festival for the Emerald Tiger Foundation.
Mm.
We basically did a recording with him. I only sung backing vocals on it, but the boys played on it. And yeah, we went out to Russia with him and played it for that. But we did stay at his house, and I can confirm that there are a lot of dogs, like a lot.
That's pretty cool, though. I really thought that was pretty gracious that he wasn't like, you're just going to have to deal with it or edit it out or whatever. I mean, but how can you pass up a sunrise in Spain? That's got to be beautiful.
It really is, man. Yeah. I mean, Ken was a really, really cool dude. Like, I appreciate the advice he gave me, throughout time. Well, he used to give me anecdotes, about the early days of Heath and all that. And he divulged some information, to me about everything that went on there. So I had a bit of an inside look to it, which was really nice. And considering to the week before I met Steve, I'd actually bought Demons and Wizards on vinyl. And the fact he was Ken's manager and then became my manager was one of those weird coincidences in life where it begs for fate, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It does. It does. Well, I wanted to ask you now, I've been a songwriter for a good chunk of my life, but I've never worked with a producer. As someone who's a songwriter, how do you like working with a producer? Is it weird to have someone come in and tell you, no, you're going to cut that out of the song and you don't have ownership of what you're writing completely?
Well, okay, I'll posit this in a different way. So I think that as a songwriter, working with a producer, I actually think is vital. I think it's incredibly important to have that outside opinion with your music. And don't get me wrong, your music's your baby. It's like it comes from your soul, for lack of a better word. It really does, and you feel it inside you. And then when someone wants to come and kind of like take it apart a little bit, it becomes like, oh, how dare you, man? How dare you come in and take this thing that I've created that's so beautiful and ruin it? And then like, all right, I'll admit, I used to have a bit of oh God, sorry, my God. You've really not got to do this, mate. Sorry.
That's all right.
But yeah, so when you've got a song and you brought it and then they kind of bring in their professional opinion, about it. Sometimes it does hurt, right? This is the truth. Like, because it's art and you're attached to it, it hurts. And 9 times out of 10, first and foremost, when you're young and naive, you will go, well, I'm really, really annoyed about this. And then you go home and you ruminate over it and you mull it over and you go through, the stages of denial or grief, about this thing you created. And then you realize that they're right. And that basically they're right. And what they've done is that they've managed to find something in your song that has structured it way better than you ever would have just by fumbling it around. And don't get me wrong, you routine things. So it's not just, it's not always necessarily this all happens in the same day. Sometimes this happens over the course of a couple of weeks, with a song. And depending on your relationship with said producer, you're either going to spend that time, as I say, routining the songs with them, or you're going to get into the studio and then they're going to do it all in one go, which is a lot more difficult. I mean, recently we were in the studio again and we took a song in and it was like, right, so what we're going to do, boys, is we're going to take all that back and we're going to rebuild it like a pyramid. And I actually think it's good, and I think it's healthy, and I think any band worth their salt in the early days will always say that a producer, makes the music better, or at least becomes a defining contributor to it. It's like who was Van Halen's producer was Ted Templeman, I think, in the early days, and it's like anyone working with anyone. You've got those great matchups like Bob Rock and Metallica, or for lack of a better example, but one jumps to my mind immediately.
Well, and I think it's interesting too. Using Metallica is a great example because Bob Rock did bring a lot. When you thought Metallica is a great band, they've got some incredible albums under their belt. They know what they're doing. They don't need anybody to tell them how to do their job. And then you think, you know what, though, after a while, it does become a bit of a formula. You start going, this is the way that I produce a song. And you just kind of go through these motions. And it's just a different riff and a different solo and a different melody, but you kind of get into a habit. So I think you're right. It is good just for the perspective to have somebody that you could trust, because there has to be a relationship building there to be able to trust somebody with your song.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, our producer who we work with is a guy called Steve Lyon. He's known for producing like Depeche Mode and The Cure. So which seems, an interesting jump from what we do. But that, I think, is part of the reason why it works so well, is because he comes from a completely different school, as it were. We all started as classic rock kids, and Steve comes at it from this kind of like new wave thing, which is pretty cool, and it really adds this different element. But of course, he also loves his stuff like Pearl Jam and things like that, which I'm a big fan of the 90s style kind of stuff. I really am. I think it was a nice reinvention of really 70s rock.
I really go back and forth with the 90s. There were some songs I liked, but I found so much of it just it lacked a passion for me. It was like, I felt like the singers were coming in and going, okay, here's the words I'm being paid to sing, so I'm just going to sing them, and I'm going to do it in the most monotone, dry way possible. And there were some songs I couldn't get into, but then you get a song like Jeremy, where that just reaches right through your chest and squeezes your heart. And I'm like, okay, there is some good stuff here.
I mean, I would also say that's actually a good point about like what to be a vocalist as well, in the sense of like what I do. I used to be very much more in the guise of wanting to be what I determine as a belter. So the Robert Plants, the Chris Cornells of this world, who have incredible range, incredible voices, and this is, I mean, Chris Cornell was kind of both in my opinion about what I'm going to say next. So like, it's more nowadays for me about climbing into the song and communicating it with the listener. I'm less interested in showing off, as it were. And I think that's a sign of one, maturity. And I also think it's a sign of just wanting to do something a little bit different than my forebears, because I love Zeppelin, right? And I love Rock Plant, and I love his voice, and I love everything he did, truly. But if I just repeated that, it would have absolutely no impact,
Yeah. Well, and you're going to feel your songs your own way.
Exactly.
You might be influenced by some of his techniques or choices that he might have made because you know his style very well, but you're still going to feel your music in your own way. And the song, not even just the song that you're singing, but the song on that particular night in that particular moment is going to come out the way it comes out in that moment, which is what's beautiful about music, is that it's very much alive.
Yeah, it is. And it's what we are essentially doing is we are transmitting an oral tradition. That's what we're doing. We're taking the tradition of what has come before us, and we are essentially stacking another block on top of it. And as I said, it doesn't need to be reinventing the wheel. It just needs to be different.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you've definitely captured that. And for you guys that are listening to the show, if you look at the show notes, I've got their website, which I want to talk to you about your website, because I think it's pretty spectacular. There are some links in the show notes to some of the songs that the guys have for the upcoming album that we're hoping will come out towards the end of the summer. And I'm really looking forward to it, because these songs are fantastic. I'm really picky about the kind of music I spend my time listening to these days. But you guys are you're added to my list, because I really enjoyed every one of these songs.
I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so very much.
So your website, just the homepage, it really vibrant. It really sticks out. It's got this light coming through the window that's just very eye-catching, but it's got a live action scene going on where there's a man and a boy. What's going on here?
So that's actually a section of our video for My Ghosts, which was one of the singles we've released. So you can actually see the music video on YouTube. It's actually been our most successful music video so far, which is amazing. It's had I had over, I think, 17,000 views, which was mind blowing for us, coming from a point where we would be like releasing a song and it would stream and it would only get a couple of 100 streams, and then, you know, but to go from that to actually having a music video that's been viewed that many times was pretty mind-blowing for us, you know. And look, it's not 100,000, but it's something really important to us as you know, essentially an unsigned, unknown, independent act.
Sure.
You know,
you're not going to get to 100,000 without hitting 17,000 first, so you're well on your way.
Exactly. So, you know, we always say, you know, aim for the stars, and if you hit the moon, you've made it. That's kind of the vibe, you know. But regardless of that, it's like, so what's happening in that scene is that's actually me and my cousin Arthur, who was playing a younger version of myself in that song. So my Ghost was a song about what I went through as a adolescent man. So I went through a lot of kind of bullying and kind of, I suppose, mental, I don't know what the word would be. Yeah, I suppose just mental bullying. You know, I went through a lot of stuff in school, and basically it was my way of reconciling the fact that sometimes when significant things happen to you when you're younger, you still carry some of the burden of that. And that's really what the song is about. And it's got some allusions to English literature, and, you know, it's a bit fancy in that way, but it, in its essence, in its core, it is very much just about how those things can still haunt you.
Yeah, and it's really, it's so sad, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. Sometimes those could be great experiences while they're horrible at the time, and you look back on them and you think, you know what, though, I'm going to draw from this when I'm going up against something that is difficult or whatever, and you realize how strong you are, that you made it through. But it's also, you know, we shouldn't have to go through those kind of things to find out we have character and we have that strength, you know.
Oh, we shouldn't.
Right. But you could draw from them and turn them into something positive.
Absolutely. And that's what I've always done with any kind of negative impact in my life. Music has always been the outlet for me in order to project that outwards in a positive light.
Yeah, I'm actually, I just realized that the website's flashing against my glasses and has been the whole episode, so I'm gonna minimize it there.
It's good, man.
Yeah, but it's a very powerful song. I mean, you can tell from both lyrically and musically, it is a very powerful song. Of the four that I listened to and that I've got the video links for, I would say that's probably the one that, and I went through a lot of bullying in school as well, so maybe that's probably why I identify with it to an extent. But I definitely feel they're all four very strong tracks, but that one really kind of hit me a little bit stronger than the others.
Oh, well, you know, I'm glad, because that's, you know, while I'm not glad that you went through the same kind of thing I did.
Thank you.
I'm glad that, you know, it resonated with you, because that's kind of my aim. You know, I write songs because I have to communicate about these things, but if I can also reach out to people who have been through the same things and have experienced the same things as me, if it gives them a helping hand, then I'm, you know, that's kind of why I'm doing this.
Well, and it's therapeutic for you as well, because you're getting that out and you're telling your story, and then you're kind of letting it go, and that's healthy for you to do. But it's also then for people like me who hear it and go, wow, okay, that isn't just me, and I'm not alone, and my feelings are justified, because this is the natural reaction to that kind of, you know, behavior. That it becomes good for the listener.
I suppose it's cathartic music, you know, right, in that way.
Exactly. I'm curious, when you guys are putting a song together, do you tend to say, hey, I wrote some lyrics, let's see what we come up with musically to match it? Or do you guys start sometimes with the music and then you add lyrics? How do you do it?
So it kind of varies. And I suppose recently, in more recent years, as it were, obviously we had the pandemic, so years, it really has been. And we lost so much. Oh my God, so much time that is. But you know, it's actually been good for us in the long run, I think, because it's given us time to sit back and double our efforts, as it were, you know. But when it comes to writing, for me, it's more about getting a feel for something. So whether it's me picking up a guitar and writing something with a couple of chords, or I walk into a rehearsal and the boys are playing something that just resonates with me, sometimes the lyrics come then. But more often than not, what happens these days is that I've written like lyrics, or at least I tend not to write full songs immediately. So when I write a lyric, it tends to be a verse and a chorus. That's kind of it. and or a verse bridge chorus, or a verse and a bridge or whatever. And it's never done. It's never done until the music's there, because then I can really get a feel for how it should go forward, So lyrically, it either comes before or after the fact. So it really depends. But yeah, sometimes I'll come in with a vocal melody and I'll be like, guys, I quite like this vocal melody. I feel like we could structure something around this. And to be honest, the writing process is beginning to change once again, because we've just added a new member to the band in the guise of our keyboard player Mike, who is actually an American as well, and he's from Boston originally.
Okay. It's interesting though. I like the way that you do that, because you can get an idea for what you want the song to be about, but then not really lock it in. Let the music then create what you need to write for the lyrics. Like, okay, I need something powerful here because the music is swelling up, and I need to like, that's a really great way of doing things, because again, it keeps it open and alive, and it doesn't lock you into anything. Not that you couldn't change your lyrics, but once you write something, you tend to be like, okay, these are the lyrics.
Yeah, it tends to get a little bit stuck in its way. Like it's like it does. Like you get this, because essentially what you're doing is you're writing a story. So it's like the story. The story's not linear, but it's got one way to go. Do you know what I mean? In terms of how you think about it, because I don't, so obviously you also talk about Heath quite a lot, yourself, and Heath obviously is a band that writes a lot from kind of fantastical ideas, and fantasy and all that. Mind you, I remember speaking with Ken, and he did tell me that Circle of Hands was written about an actual seance he went to, which was pretty cool. But I tend to write pretty much all my lyrics from my own personal experience. So I don't really tap into anything on the on that side of things. But that's just how I do things. It's because as we were talking about earlier, music for me is a very cathartic process. So it's if I'm writing about something that I've actually experienced, then it's good.
Well, I'm sure that you can get into like a seance group on Facebook and maybe meet some people.
Yeah. Oh, trust me. Here in England, we've got quite the community of certain things and pagans and whatnot, and I've been involved in all of it. Me and my other half are quite esoteric, I suppose.
You guys have, I think, far more ghost hunting groups, but you've got like such a longer history, of things that there would be more, I guess, available to explore, just because there's a lengthier time.
There is a lot of I would say in this country there is a lot of things that are up for certain interpretations. That's how I would describe it.
I think that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
I remember when I interviewed Ken shortly before he passed, what was amazing to me was he told me that he would not write a single note of music until he completed the lyrics. Now, when I write lyrics, there tends to be some kind of melody or rhythm or something that I start hearing when I'm writing. It fascinated me that somebody who was such a great creative musician wouldn't have that happen to him, that he could just write it as a poem without any melody attached. That's weird to me.
I concur. I think that's quite odd. Like for me personally, I think I probably write quite similarly to yourself. When I write a lyric, I do often hear a melody. However, that is always subject to change depending on what happens with the music. So I'm quite adaptable in the sense of how I do it. But yes, most of the time, that's actually a good point. I do have a melody in my head as I write a lyric. And sometimes I forget what that melody was and I use the same lyric in a completely different way. But, it does happen. Like recently, actually, me and Mike, our keyboard player, we put together a piece called Little Out West, which I'm not sure if it will end up getting used eventually. Hopefully, I mean, I quite like it, but it's kind of like a bit of a piano ballady type thing. But I'd written these lyrics prior. I was stood outside of McDonald's, like waiting for a lift somewhere, and I had, I suppose, written a melody at the time. But by the time me and Mike got around to working on it, weeks and weeks later, I have no idea. I don't even know what the original melody was. But what we put together ourselves was so nice and evocative, So it felt right. And that's more for me is does it feel right? Does this feel like what I'm saying? And usually that happens kind of instinctively. I would say that I don't really think about that too much.
I'll tell you a quick story. I was in Michigan. I was living in Colorado at the time, and I was in Michigan visiting family. And at this time, I was a songwriter, but I was really dependent on the technology, like my sequencer, to record what I was playing, because I didn't know how to write music by hand at the time. And I came up with this melody on my grandmother's piano, and I really liked it. But my grandfather had passed away. I didn't know where all his equipment and everything was, so I ended up having no way to remember this song, and I really loved it. So it was a 26-hour drive from Detroit back to Colorado Springs. And every hour I would turn off the cassette player and I would hum that melody so that I would remember it. And as soon as I got home, didn't bring the luggage in or anything, I just turned on my sequencer, recorded it, went, thank God.
Brilliant. No, do you know though, that is the exact same way. I think it was Bernie Taupin, lyricist for Elton John. I'm pretty sure that's what he did with Rocket Man.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that's what he did. I can't. He had nothing to write it on, as far as I'm aware. I can't remember exactly if that was the case, but I know that there's a story like that I've heard, and it. Imagine, before we had phones and things, how on earth would we, remember all this stuff? It's just. It's actually quite astonishing that people got anything done.
It really is. Well, you become so dependent on what you have available to you that it's like, GPS nowadays. And I think about the days when I had to print out a MapQuest and I had a physical piece of paper to try and look at while I'm driving. And then before that, we had maps that you had to fold out. And, it's really amazing what we adapted to. And you think, how did we ever do this before that?
I know. I mean, to be fair, that is really the history of humans, really, in order to moving around. You think about Marco Polo going all the way from Italy to Mongolia, to the court of Kublai Khan. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how on earth did he manage that?
How did he even know how to get there? He couldn't print out a MapQuest.
Well, I suppose if you just keep heading east, mate, you might get there eventually.
Right. Yeah. Just follow that one star, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, but at the same time, I mean, when I listen to the sound that you guys are getting in the studio, it's fantastic. I mean, it's a beautifully balanced mix. Everything is coming through nice and clear. It's so well done that I think, thank God you're recording today and not 1968.
I suppose so. Yeah. I suppose we would have made do with what we had, but there would have been something to be said for it for sure. But mind you, our music, I don't think our music would have been written in 1968. Do you know what I mean?
No, yeah, not at all. It's
all very much this product of its time and everything that came before it. As I said earlier, it's that continuing of a tradition, and that is really, the story of it all. That's the story of rock and roll anyway. It's just a continuing tradition all the way from back in, in the United States when it originated with blues and with black music, really.
Yeah. And if you go back and you listen to some recordings from the 60s, especially from Motown, for example, and you hear, everything is just so mono and so there's not a lot of separation, and some of it's just all pan center. It's just so hard to listen to in some ways. But at the same time, I'm so used to hearing it that the engineer in me can let go and just enjoy it. And then there's that side that comes out and goes, please let me find the masters so I can remix this for someone.
When you think about the early Beatles stuff that was on mono, do you know what I mean? Or even the Stones, right? And I think what was I going to say about it? When it comes to music, especially when it comes to what we will put under the umbrella term popular music, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's rock, whether it's rap, whether it's country or anything. I think that one of the main things in music is it's really about kind of what you leave out. That is the most significant thing, because it's so easy to go into a studio and put down every single idea you have for a song. But every single idea you have for a song is just going to completely fill up all the space.
Right. And another layer because you found another patch on your keyboard that sounded really good, or you got a new guitar pedal and you want to add this. It's so easy to overdo a song. I
really love that ocarina you put on there. Yeah, great.
That's my favorite. Yeah. I hate that sound. Well, it's not the sound I hate. It's the way it's often recorded, because it's just so ear piercing if it's not EQ'd properly. It's like a flute. A flute is a beautiful instrument, but if it's not EQ'd properly, it could just cut right through and ruin a song so horribly for me.
The same with Bob Dylan playing a harmonica, mate. Like I love Dylan, right? But some of that harmonica playing on, like there's a song, was it on Highway 61? What is it? There's a song called, I think it's Queen Jane approximately. The harmonica at the end is so piercing. I'm like, oh my God. Like,
exactly. Well, let me ask you this before I let you go. In terms of songwriting, and of course, when you're working on something, and when you're working on something with the band, how do you decide, okay, this song is done? And I realize your producer's going to play a part in that too, but how do you say, okay, we're not adding anything more to this one, I think we've got what we need here?
I mean, that's actually a really, really good point. Let me think about that for a second. I think, all right. So I think there's different stages to it. That's how I would describe this. So if me and the guys are together, just to explain anyway for anyone listening, is that so the band is actually now made up of 5 people. There's myself as the lead vocalist. My brother Charlie is on the drums. Our bass player is a guy called Joe Newman, and Harvey Groom's our guitar player. And then we've got Mike Gillum on the keys now. And when we get in a room and we write together, there's that part where we say, okay, this song is done. And just recently we went, as I said, we went into the studio and we had a track that we considered done in its final instrumental form as the band decides. Yeah, everything's finished. It's cool. We know exactly how we want to do this. And we walk into the studio and we play the song for our producer, and Steve goes, right, so there's too much going on, and we're going to need to scale this back. And he goes, and you see this part that you're doing on the drums here, Charlie, right? I really like this part, and I kind of want you to do that throughout the whole song, just with variations. And then Charlie's obviously completely distraught because he's written all these, great drum parts, but then he has to go in and he tracks it differently. And then we've got to kind of reconsider how we layer the track up. So when we work with our producer, it's more of a case of, once again, it is that lesson of what you leave out. It's the lesson of space. It's the lesson of what's going to make this song sing the most. How are we going to do that? So in the case of a song like Fast Food at Midnight, for instance, that was very much a case of we had it finished and then we stripped it down and we built it back up again. And it works, and to be fair, Fast Food is one of those songs that I would say that in its skeleton, it didn't change all that much. Mm-hmm. But sonically, my God, when we took that song into the studio, I thought it was one of the weakest tracks that we had. When we came out of the studio, I thought it was at least in the top 3.
Wow. Okay. That was the first one I listened to, and I thought, first off, right off the bat, I'm like, I like the way these guys sound. That was the first thing that struck me, was the sound. The mix, the sound quality that you guys are getting, absolutely fantastic. And then as I listened to the song more, I'm like, okay, I like the way the writing is done here, and I really like the performance. And I'm like, all right, now I want to hear more. Right off the bat, that song sold me on you guys without any effort whatsoever.
Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate that. I mean, it's an odd one because it's almost, I suppose in a way, it's almost kind of, it pushes on the psychedelic rock kind of thing as well. I suppose is actually really having a resurgence at the moment, especially in indie music, which is odd. It's an odd thing where you've kind of got this re-emergence of it, and I think Tame Impala kind of spearheaded that, and then it's kind of fanned out from there, where you have bands like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard and stuff, who are just like really psych rock guys, and it all came out of Australia. It's bizarre, but I think we kind of tapped into a bit of that. And it's funny because some people have credited that song as being kind of Doors-ish. And I love the Doors, but I don't think we sound like the Doors, but I love them, and I suppose there must be some sort of bleed in there from that. I don't know.
I can't say I picked up on anything that would have made me say, you guys sound like the Doors. Not at all. That's
No,
interesting.
it is interesting, but this is the thing I'm trying. It's like when we talk about the music, and obviously, you like it yourself. So I mean, I don't know what kind of things you picked up in it yourself personally, but like we've had all sorts, man. Like we've played a live show before. I've come off stage and I've had three separate things. I've had one guy tell me it sounds like Stereophonics. I don't know if you know them. They're an English band. Yeah, pretty popular from the 90s. But those, I had another guy saying we sounded like Kings of Leon, and
Okay.
I really don't hear, but it's cool. I mean, I like Kings of Leon. Yeah, it works for me. And then I had another guy tell me that it sounded like Prince sometimes, and I'm like, where's Prince coming from? I'm like, fair.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, all compliments by any means to be associated with any of those acts is great, but I don't hear any of that in that song myself.
No, exactly. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's interesting, it's weird the kind of things that you get. But in terms of doneness, as it were, in the studio, it tends to come to a point where we listen back to it and we go, okay, we've put enough stuff on it now, and maybe that should be it, and you get down the basic elements, and then you add one or two or three things depending on what the track is, and it's always personalized to the song. Obviously, you don't just layer a sound on it for the sake of it, and in creating I think in the idea of in creating like a cohesive sound, I think what it is that the drums, the vocalist, the guitars and the bass all sound the same in the sense of throughout every song they've got the same tonality, yeah. But then anything else that you decide to add on that gives it color, and personally for me, I think that's when the song's done, when the song has color and the vocal's finally on it, and you've done everything with the vocal that you can do that doesn't oversaturate it, and if the singer's, me in this case, has captured the essence of the song, I think that's when you can probably turn around and say, okay, this sounds done. And then it's not really done until you've heard the mix that you like.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole other aspect of it, is the mix can bring out a lot that you maybe didn't even notice about the song when you were recording it.
100%, because sometimes I would say the mix is everything, really, in terms of it, because you can put as much on a track as you want. If it hasn't got the right mix, it can still sound completely like a million miles away from where you want it to be.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's when I stop saying, all right, let me just try this, and then I undo the last four things that I did and say, okay, I went too far, now it's done. And I remove the last ones, Well, Jack, it's been such a joy talking to you. Thank you so much again for taking some time out. I think you guys are a great band, and I'm not just saying that because I had the opportunity to interview. I really enjoy your music. I really hope that people catch on to it, because I think you have a lot to offer.
Well, thank you a lot, Scott. I really do appreciate it, mate. And I mean, hopefully we will make it out to the States at some point in the next, well, I'm not going to say in the next year. I don't know what's going to happen, but I would love it. It's always been a dream for me to come play in the States, and yeah.
Well, we would love to have you. I know that things are starting to open up a little more on the international side. They just removed the mask ban for airlines, which is a pretty big step. So I think we'll probably have to wait a little while and see if the COVID numbers start going back up again because of that. If they're stable now, I think we'll probably start being okay. We've got some bands that are coming over, but it's really, from what I've heard, it's getting the shows insured is the issue. Even with signing the waivers and having the the verbiage on the tickets that's saying you're waiving your rights and all that, it's still kind of a nightmare. So we're getting there though. So hopefully maybe 2023 things will be pretty open, and you guys will have done a bunch of shows more in your area, and you'll have that that history behind you with the new songs on stage, and then you'll come over here and go, all right, we're gonna do some shows in the States now.
I mean, let's hope so. I mean, it really is just we would just relish the chance, is all I can say.
Yeah, and then you've got a band like the Dead Daisies out of LA, and they're just like, I don't care, we're going to England, we're going to do some shows over there. They're just like, as soon as touring opened up at all, they were one of the first bands on it, and they're just like, all right, we'll do some dates. All right, we'll go to Europe. All right, we'll come back and do some dates. I mean, they were just like, if we could play, we're playing, and I love that. I
don't blame them, and they've got the resources to be able to do that. Do you know what I mean? jump on over here and all that. I mean, look, if money was no object, we probably would have already done the States 100 times.
Oh,
you know what
sure.
I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we look forward to having you. We look forward to the new album coming out. Please feel free to come back on the show and talk when the album comes out. We'll talk about that and the new songs and how it all went.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to do that. I think it'd be brilliant.
Excellent. Well, if you guys that are listening to the show, check out the show notes. I've got the link to the website, to the videos. You guys are going to love it. If you love rock and roll at all, you guys are going to love this band. Our Propaganda, check them out. Jack, thank you again. We'll see you again in the future.
My absolute pleasure, Scott. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.